It's the end of the month, which means it's time to talk about all of the books that we read. I read a total of 8 books this month, which is an average of 2 books a week, which is pretty typical for me. And I know some people read like 30 books in a month, and some people read 1 book a month. It doesn't really matter how many books you read in a month, as long as you're enjoying all of them, because we're about the quality and not about the quantity. And that was definitely very true for me this month. Although I did still read a decent amount of books, they were all very high quality books, because I gave 4 of them 5 stars. That's literally insane for me. I'm lucky if I give 1 book 5 stars in a single month. And I read 3 of them back to back. I was doubting myself because I have never done that before. I've never given so many 5 stars. My lowest rated book this month was a 3.5 stars. And that is Blackmail in Bibinka by Mia P. Manansala. This is the 3rd book in the Teacher Rosie's Kitchen mystery. It's this cozy mystery series that's very food based. And the main character is Filipino American. It kind of the centers around her Filipino American family, which is really fun and definitely why I enjoy it so much. Personally, never read any other book that features a Filipino American main character except for Look Off with Love. That one was kind of weird though. They just kind of like threw it in there kind of out of pocket at the very end of the book and then never mentioned it again. But you know what I mean? Like, this is the first one where the Filipino American experience was actually explored and represented in a book. The author herself is Filipino American, so the representation of the Filipino American experience is fairly accurate. I mean, you know, obviously there's no one universal experience, but she's got the Filipino aunties who love gossip, and her family loves food and gathers with food, and one of their biggest fears is to not have enough food. For my family and like for most like Filipino gatherings I've been to, there's always an excessive amount of food. Karaoke, I've actually never been to a gathering where like they've done karaoke, but I know karaoke is like really big in the Philippines. And I also learned so much about my own culture from this book. She talks about so many dishes and so many foods and so many things that I've never even heard of. The mystery itself, it's a cozy, you know, so it's not like super high stakes. It's not like the most intense mystery ever, but it was still very enjoyable. Oh, and she also has a little dachshund named Longanisa. Longanisa is a Filipino breakfast sausage. She really do be looking like a longanisa. I love these characters so much. They really do feel like my extended family members. I can almost put a face to all of them, like using extended family members' faces, which is really fun. And then moving on to my 2 4-star reads. Stolen Air by Holly Black. I really enjoyed this. This takes place 8 years after the final book in the Folk of the Air series, so Oak is all grown up, Ren is all grown up. They have a little cute romance together. This one is definitely a lot more romance forward than the Folk of the Air trilogy. I will say I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the Folk of the Air series, but I still obviously really enjoyed it to give it a 4 stars. A lot of this book really felt like Frozen fanfiction. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's still very well written. There are just so many parallels to the Frozen movies. There's trolls, there's an enchanted cursed forest situation, there's an ice palace. There's so many things that I can't mention without spoiling anything. Once I made that connection, it made it even more fun to read the book because I was just looking for all of like the little things that I could connect back to Frozen, which was really fun. I really enjoyed both Oak and Ren as characters. I liked reading from Ren's perspective. The main thing that I really didn't like about this book was there was this really abrupt thing that happened with Ren's character arc towards the end of this book. It was weird because you could definitely see it coming and it definitely predicted it to happen. I just didn't love how it was executed because it felt like it was thrown in your face almost, to the point where it almost felt like an overreaction even though it wasn't. Like, it was definitely warranted. The writing in this book just didn't have the same magic that the Folk of the Air trilogy had. It wasn't the same whimsical storybook-like type of prose. This one was just a lot more straightforward. It was still really well written, really well done. Just not quite as good as the Cruel Prince series, but I still really like it. And there was a massive cliffhanger at the end, which kind of stresses me out because we're gonna have to wait like probably at least a year, maybe even over a year for the next book. But yeah, solid 4 stars. And then another 4 stars that I think is just a little tiny bit better than that one. This is like a higher 4 stars, if you will, which is odd because this one's a novella. It's How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories. This is Carden's little novella. As short as it was, it's literally less than 200 pages and there's like a ton of illustrations in the book, but it was just really well crafted. I loved the writing writing in this is what I mean by the magical storybook like type of writing. This really felt like I was reading a fairy tale. This one almost read like a parable. I really enjoyed this. We got to see like a little bit of Jude and Carden's relationship too. There's also some references to some of the infamous scenes that happened in the Cruel Prince series, which is really fun. But like, look at that. I really enjoyed this. I think if you like the Cruel Prince series, I'm usually not a novella girly, but if you like the Cruel Prince series, I think this is a really fun one to read. Really short one, you know, if you just want to get a little bit more Carden. And then moving on to the 4.5 star rating that I gave this month, and that was for 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. I really love how Holly Jackson writes these YA mysteries. I think they're just such a good change of pace from your typical run-of-the-mill domestic thrillers. I read quite a bit of thrillers, and if you read too many domestic thrillers at once, they all start like kind of blending together. They all start feeling the same, and having a YA mystery is really refreshing. I really love how even if this is a YA book, she's not afraid to go to some really dark places. Like, she was not afraid to put her characters through the ringer, which is really fun. That sounds messed up, but you know what I mean. I feel like when you're reading a mystery thriller, you want to be thrilled. You want to be on the edge of your seat, and I definitely was. Like, I was biting my fingers off when I was reading this book. It was a good time. I really enjoyed the characters. I didn't quite love being in Red's point of view for the whole book. It definitely got better, and also I really love how the mystery was laid out. I love how in every single step of the story she would give us tiny little bits and pieces of the puzzle. She does a really great job at foreshadowing the really big thing without making it super obvious. This is actually one of those thrillers that I wouldn't mind rereading again. Usually with me, when I read a thriller, that's it, because I know what's gonna happen and I'm like, I don't ever want to reread that again. And there's also something that happens at the very end that I quite enjoyed. And then let's move on to our 4 5-star reads. This one's gonna be difficult because I'm gonna have to rank them. This is the first book that I read in the year, City of Lost Souls by Cassandra Clare. This is the 5th book in the Mortal Instruments series. This is a reread for me. This is one of my comfort series, and this is actually one of my favorite books in that series. I literally have something that is inspired by this book tattooed on myself. It's my one and only tattoo, and it's literally based on this book. That's how much I love this. I intentionally chose this to be the first book of the year because I knew that I was gonna give it a 5 stars, and I wanted to set the tone for the year, and I think it might have worked. I love it. I obviously can't talk too much about this book because it is the 5th book in the series, but we got a lot of Sebastian in this one, and he is definitely one of my favorite villains. Objectively, is this book really a 5 stars? Not really. There's a lot of like cringy things that still happen in this book. I think the Mortal Instruments series in general is not really Cassandra Clare's strongest series. It's her first series ever, so it makes sense, but it's just so nostalgic for me that I love it so much. That's really all I have to say about it. Clays for life. Like, I know they're cringy, I know they're kind of annoying sometimes, but I think they're like my favorite Cassandra Clare couple. They're kind of like my comfort couple at this point. I don't know. They're literally the reason why I got into reading. Like, it's them. They are the reason why we're here today. We have them to thank for so many things, so they deserve the 5 stars. It's getting difficult. Now we're on the top 3, and I think at number 3 with a bronze medal is Addicted After All by Kristen Becker-Ritchie, the last book in the Addicted series. I love this series so much. I love them as characters. I love the development that they went throughout this entire series, and you see like the culmination. You see all of their improvements, not just the 2 characters, but every single person in this series, including the side characters, including the parents. They went through something really, really big in this one, and it was really fun to kind of see them go through that, especially Lo. I'm just happy for them. I feel like these people are real, man. Like, these characters are so well-rounded. They feel like real people. I love them so much. The ending to this book was perfect. I'm gonna admit I'm not the biggest Reich and Daisy fan, but I actually like them more in this book. I know I've said this before and it's gonna sound dramatic again, but this series really redefined the romance genre for me. Like, the relationships in this book are great, not just the romantic ones, but the platonic ones as well. And they really put an emphasis on love, friendship, and family. This is our 3rd place, our bronze medalist for the month. Then we're in the top 2 books. This one I'm really, really torn because I just absolutely freaking love these books so much. But I think I'm gonna give the silver to Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I don't want to talk too much about what this book is about because I definitely think that if you're planning on reading this book, you should go into it blind. Don't look up anything about it. Don't even look up what it's about, because that's what I did, and I ended up having the most magical experience. But that might be because I really, really, really really love architecture, and there's a huge emphasis on architecture in this book. There's also just really beautiful symbolisms and metaphors. If that's something that you like, I think you're gonna really enjoy this book. I think as a character, Piranesi is so interesting. I love seeing this world from his perspective because he brings a really fresh and interesting point of view. There's also really interesting commentaries about academia. I love that there was also an emphasis to just enjoy yourself. You don't need to know how or why. Sometimes you just need to let the world guide you and just experience things without having to know every single explanation, and just enjoy life for what it is. I really loved how that was tackled in this book, and I always need that reminder because I'm somebody who is very scientific. I have a very logical mind. I tend to always want to know. I always tend to need to have an explanation for things. And I always love being reminded it's like, hey, like you need to take a step back. Just enjoy things. You don't need to question every single detail. Man, it was a really just magical book. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. It's definitely on my 6-star list. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I read it from Libby, so I don't have a physical copy, but I low-key want to break my book buying ban just to get it because this book was so good. Anyways, the #1 book of the month, the gold medalist for January of 2023, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. God, this book, I don't even know where to begin. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is essentially about a group of students who murder one of their friends for the aesthetic. That's the best way I could describe this book. This book is a comedy of all comedies. It's so funny in a very understated way. It's not like in-your-face comedy, ha ha ha. It's more like a comedy in the sense that it's definitely making fun of what it's writing about. It's definitely making fun of these characters that are too serious about academia. They're too serious about the classics. They take things so seriously to the point that they literally do not care that they killed somebody because it fit the aesthetic. Beauty is terror. Whatever we call beautiful, we quiver before it. This basically talks about the dangers of aestheticizing academia, the dangers of aestheticizing everything. Like, while aesthetics isn't terrible, there's a line. And if you cross that line to the point where you would do absolutely everything for the aesthetic, including one of the most heinous, if not the most heinous crimes against humanity, aka murder, this is what happens. I don't know how to like talk about this book without spoiling anything because there's so many like different things to discuss, but they're all like really spoilery, and I don't want to spoil anything for you guys in case you have not read this book. It's also really well written. I love Donna Tartt's writing. I could literally get lost in her words. Using Richard Pavin as the vessel for the story was perfect because he's kind of like the epitome of this naive student, goes into academia, idealizes the whole thing because of mostly the aesthetic and not really knowing what the hell he's getting himself into. There's a scene where the main character literally almost dies from hypothermia, but he's looking at it from this very aestheticized perspective, and it's a freaking trip. Just please read this book if you haven't already because I want to talk to someone about it. If you've read this book, let me know. Let's talk about it. But yeah, these are all of the books that I read this month. Literally the best reading month of my life, and I am so happy. I hope February brings more of the same energy. I want more 5-star reads. I want more new favorite books. Let me know how your reading month went. I hope it went really well. And also like let me know some of the books that you guys read. Like, what are your favorite books that you read this month? But yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. Do your thing, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.